Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you guys how to make this adorable Cookie Monster cake. So to get started, I have two 9-inch pans, which I've lined with parchment paper, and a dome bowl, which I've lined with parchment paper also. And I'm going to fill these with marble cake, and I'm going to show you guys how to get that marble effect. So I have some vanilla and some chocolate cake batter. What I do to give the cake a marble effect is I add some vanilla to the bottom. You can start with chocolate if you want. I add a little bit of vanilla, just randomly placing clumps of vanilla, and it's actually better for one of your batters to be thinner, so I always make my chocolate one actually always comes out thinner. So I just go ahead and add some chocolate throughout, and then once I add chocolate, I add a little more vanilla, then I add a little more chocolate. And to get the marble effect, you're going to need a sharp tool. You can use a toothpick or a skewer. I'm using this metal thermometer that has a point at the end, and I'm just going to swirl the batters together. So basically just creating big swirls. You don't want to mix the batter too much because then it's going to be one tone. You want to make sure that you're able to see the two separate swirls. I'm going to repeat the same steps with my other cake pan and with my dome bowl. And this is what your beautiful swirl pattern should look like. I baked these off at 350 degrees. The two round pans baked faster than the bowl. The bowl took about 20-25 minutes extra, so just make sure that you use a toothpick or a wooden skewer to check that the cake is done in the center. Once the cakes have completely chilled for a couple hours, I'm going to remove them from the cake pans and remove the parchment paper, and then we're going to start torting and leveling the cakes. I start off by leveling the very bottom muffin top to the dome cake, which is going to be Cookie Monster's head. And then I start leveling off the tops of the other two cakes. And we're actually going to save the tops of one of the cakes because it's going to be a giant chocolate chip cookie that we're going to add to the cake. To tort the cake, you simply cut the layers in half so that you have two separate cake layers. So since one of my cake layers was taller than the other, I have 3 cake layers instead of 4. And now I'm going to cut my dome cake in half so that I have 2 separate layers. And the reason why we need to cut them in half is that so we don't have a really thick cake layer, and we can fill each cake layer with buttercream and also add simple syrup to keep the cakes moist. Now to get ready to stack and fill my cakes, I'm adding a cake board to my rotating cake stand, and I'm going to add a little buttercream to the cake board and add the cake on top. And the reason why I add the buttercream is because it helps the cake stick and not slide out of place. So now that we have our first cake layer, I'm going to brush it with simple syrup, add some buttercream. In this case, I'm using cookies and cream buttercream. It's so delicious. It's just my vanilla buttercream with crushed Oreos inside, and it goes perfect with the Cookie Monster theme. So we're going to repeat the process, add another cake layer on top of this, add simple syrup and buttercream until we finish stacking. Then give the cake a crumb coat of some more cookies and cream buttercream, let it set in the refrigerator, and we give it a final coat of plain vanilla buttercream just so that we don't have these crumbs and so that we have a smooth surface on the cake. Then I go ahead and add my dowels for support since there will be 2 other cake layers on top of this. I just use a wire cutter to trim the dowels to size, and then I let this chill. Now moving on to the little muffin top that we trimmed off of one of the cakes. We're going to use this to be a chocolate chip cookie. So I'm going to add some simple syrup to keep it moist. Then I'm going to place a cake board on the bottom of this using a little bit of buttercream to help it stick. And then I'm going to cover the entire thing in cookies and cream buttercream. It does not have to be smooth because we're going to cover this in fondant and give it a rough look so that it looks like a crispy chocolate chip cookie. And no chocolate chip cookie is perfectly smooth. They have plenty of bumps and ridges, so that's exactly what we're going to try to mimic. So once I finish covering this in some of the delicious cookies and cream buttercream, we're going to let it refrigerate and let it set. Now I'm going to move on to the dome cake, which I've cut in half so that we can fill and stack it. And this is going to be Cookie Monster's face. So I'm going to add some cookies and cream buttercream, and then I'm going to give it a light crumb coat. Because this one is not going to be covered in fondant, it's going to be covered in blue royal icing so that we can make it look like actual fur. So I'm giving it a crumb coat and then I'm going to let it chill. Now moving back to my chocolate chip cookie layer, which has chilled, I'm going to add some dowels because the Cookie Monster head is going to be on top of this layer. So I'm just adding about 4 dowels in the center, and then I'm going to trim those to size, and then we're going to continue on and cover our cakes in fondant. I'm going to start with the chocolate chip cookie cake layer, which we just doweled. And I'm going to use some white fondant, and I'm using a little bit of yellow and a little bit of brown food color to create this really golden color, kind of to mimic the chocolate chip cookie color. And I'm just going to knead this until I get the perfect tone that I want. So after kneading for a little while, this is the color that I was left with, and I think it needs to be a little darker, so I'm adding more brown, and I'm going to continue kneading this again. So now that it's the perfect golden brown color that I was looking for, I'm going to roll it out and cover our cookie cake in this. And remember, this is supposed to look like a chocolate chip cookie that's not perfectly smooth, so if you have any lumps and any creases, that's perfectly fine. I'm actually adding more creases and wrinkles to it to make it look like a real chocolate chip cookie. I'm going to trim off the extra fondant, leaving a little bit of fondant overlapping. Then I'm going to turn the cake over and tuck in the extra fondant. So we're left with this giant chocolate chip cookie without the chocolate chips, but we're going to add those right now. To create the chocolate chip cookies, I'm using black candy melts, which look like chips but bigger, and I'm also using melted candy melts as the glue. So I'm adding the candy melts on there as the giant chocolate chips, and then I'm going to use actual chocolate chips as mini chocolate chips throughout the cake. Here I have this really nice light royal blue fondant, and I'm going to roll that over my rolling pin, and we're going to cover our 9-inch round cakes in this. So I unroll that over the cake, and then I use my hands and a fondant smoother to smooth out the sides and top of the cake. Using my pizza cutter, I trim off the excess fondant from the bottom. And I smooth out the sides once more. Now we're going to add the chocolate chip cookie cake layer on top of this one. So I'm adding a little bit of melted candy melts to help the cake board stick to this cake. And I'm adding that right on top. Then I'm going to add the Cookie Monster head layer on top of that one. And I'm going to stick a wooden dowel that's a little shorter than the entire cake right through the center. Now to decorate Cookie Monster's head, I have a piping bag fitted with the piping tip 1M, and I have some Wilton Royal Blue Royal Icing. It's a cookie icing, and I'm going to need about 3 of these bags to cover the entire cake. So I'm going to empty the contents of 3 of the bags into the piping bag, and I'm going to begin to pipe, and as you can see, it kind of gives it like a fur-like texture. And I'm going to pipe in different directions so that it gives it more texture. After I finish completely piping the head, I'm going to let the royal icing set for a while, and then I'm going to move on to making Cookie Monster's eyes. So to make the eyes, I'm just rolling 2 white balls of fondant, and then I'm flattening them out slightly. Then I'm going to grab 2 black candy melts and flip them over so that the flat side is facing forward. And I'm going to glue one kind of normal and the other one a little crooked because Cookie Monster's eyes look kind of crazy. Then I'm going to use a little bit more of my melted candy melts as a glue and insert a popsicle stick in the center of each of the eyes and let that set. Now using some black fondant, I'm going to freeform Cookie Monster's mouth, which is really big and wide open. Then I'm going to grab some of my golden brown fondant and create a little circle and make a little bite mark as if Cookie Monster took a bite out of it. And this is going to be a mini chocolate chip cookie that I'm gluing onto his mouth with some melted candy melt. Now that the eyes have set, I'm going to add these onto the very top of Cookie Monster's head. And then I'm going to place the mouth in the center of his face. I made the Sesame Street street sign using some green fondant, and now I'm using some thin yellow fondant strips as a trim around the border. You can customize the center of this street sign with a name, or if you wanted to say happy birthday, or for whatever event you want to make this cake. I finished off the bottom of the cookie cake layer with some mini chocolate chip cookies just to add a nice border detail so that we don't have that gap in between the cake layers. And now I am going to add the street sign to the center of the front of the cake. And our Cookie Monster cake is complete. This is truly a work of art. He has the two giant eyes popping out the top of his head. We made the mouth with a cookie inside as if he's taking a bite out of the cookie. He has that giant cookie layer under him and the mini chocolate chip cookies around the border. And of course the street sign that can be customized with any name or saying that you want. This cake is just beautiful and the colors absolutely pop. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned next week for another episode. Bye bye.